Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, Counting Your Blessings and Being the Blessing with Dr. Rebecca Williams Dinsdale. We talk about helping others to see their own goodness and capability, how to keep going and be courageous in the face of challenge, and what brings her the most joy in life. And as a special bonus, here's a poem about her that her dad wrote. There is a writer we know whose books are perceptive. Wisdom abounds for those if receptive. Dr. Beck is her name, her mentoring renowned. Coping and thriving, all problems she'll confound. So she's your solution, whatever the task. She'll make your day brighter as soon as you ask.
Dr. Rebecca is a prize-winning triple graduate whose work is to encourage your life joy through beautiful books, kindly coaching, and tremendous talks. Her unique combination of education, empathy, and experience is used to help you to shine ever brighter. She took her first school assembly at just 7 years old and has been inspiring audiences ever since. She has become an expert in adversity after severe chronic illness resulted in 12 to 40 weeks a year in bed or housebound for more than 20 years. Her education was disrupted continually, but she learnt her Lifejoy strategies to build immense resilience. The university asked her to give motivating talks to their new postgraduate students. When they responded so well, she knew this was her purpose. As well as offering a range of inspiring talks, she works as a celebrant, where she has led almost 1,000 loving funeral services. Dr. Rebecca is now an author, coach and speaker, with her latest book entitled Your Lifejoy Year, an enriching thought for every day.
Good morning to you, Rebecca. How are you today?
Good morning. It's lovely to be with you both.
Likewise. Mm-hmm. And your very bright background that listeners can't hear, obviously, but you check out the Zoomie when we post that.
It's like you match the background, James.
Yeah, put on my yellow T-shirt too.
Absolutely.
Yes, very thoughtful, joyous.
So for our first question then, Rebecca, when you were little, did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, it's the question everybody asks children, isn't it? And I think it's so lovely because in some ways we're always growing, aren't we? And we're always wondering when we'll be grown up enough. But I thought about this question a lot. And I think my earliest memory is being 7 and the teacher got me to take the first school assembly. And there was a moment, I was so tiny that my little feet, my knees were knocking, and she stood me on her chair. And I had written something that obviously she liked. I then had to say the prayers. And there was a moment when it felt like there was electricity up my feet. It was utterly joyous, most alive. And I suddenly thought, I like this. I could do some more of this. So I just thought I'd be a teacher like my mummy and play piano and, do school assemblies and just fit the electricity up the feet feeling was just suddenly, this is where I'm meant to be. So I would like that in hindsight to be more, to be less prosaic, but that's what I thought. I just thought I'd be like my mummy and play the hymns. It'd be lovely.
So did you pursue that pathway then? Did you learn piano? Did you become a teacher? What happened?
Well, I sort of did and I sort of didn't really. That's a lovely question. I had teachers who were parents and had been brought up to really value education. But there was quite a seminal moment. I was ill at 17, so I had always been very diligent. I've been on all the school trips. I've been on the committees. I tried hard. I've been in brass band, county choir, but I got very sick at 17. So it was so transformatively bad that everything went. So all of normal life and that normal pattern that you would expect to go to university, get a job, go on holidays, have a husband, do joyous things, it all changed. So I had glandular fever at 17. I then overnight was really physically ruined and ended up with the next 2 decades of severe ME. So that meant I wasn't just unwell, I was unemployable. So the hope of even doing anything, it was about what you could survive and not get to hospital, really. Your goals become tiny when you're that unwell. So I ended up doing one A-level at a time on 2 hours of school a week, very unwell. And then I went to university locally because I was too ill to go away. And I was treated with such kindness and care, but I mean, I was more dead than alive. And I did 1/6 time of my degree. And I remember when I told you this before, 1/6 time, it's such a joke, isn't it? 1/6 time. But it wasn't a joke by the time I finished. Mm-hmm. So from being that little 7-year-old who was full of bounce and energy and vigor, I was ruined, really, and frequently told there was no point continuing. You're going so slowly, and kindly so. But it was like, what's the point, Becca? And I kept thinking there must be a purpose to this. So the purpose came about beautifully because the university asked me to give motivating talks to their new students. Because I was the raggy, worn out, keeping going one. Really, I was. They used to just like get Becca out the cupboard and cheer everybody up because she's in a much worse position and she's much more diligent. So it was an odd time. So I ended up, by the end of that first degree, I'd gone to do 1/3 time. And I would always tell people, and I always tell all my clients and readers now, there is great treasure in doing 1/6 time. So the university asked me to do these talks, and they wanted me to talk about what it was like to be a postgraduate. And it was interesting because all the postgrads would stand up and say, you do this research, you do this in the lab, you do these interviews, whatever. And it suddenly dawned on me that these new students didn't need help in their subject because they had that. What they needed was help to keep going when it got difficult. And suddenly I had all these tools and strategies to keep going through great enduring challenge because I was having between 12 and 40 weeks a year in bed or hospital. It was just unrelenting physical illness that you suddenly have to, you sink or you swim. So I gave this talk to the students and I was back to being 7 with electricity at my feet. And it was beautiful and it was wonderful. And there was a wonderful man in the front row who was doing an MPhil. And he put his hand up and he just said, darling, you need to do that for a living. And when he called me darling, I thought, yes, please, help me. So that's where it came, really. And the great beauty of that, all of that struggle, was that he was a startup business advisor. And he said, come and see me. So that was in the middle of a master's degree. And then I did a doctorate because really I could do very little else. And also I loved it. And by the end of that, I was speaking and writing a lot. And I suddenly thought, what can I do with what I have? Because I was still, about 12, 14, 16 weeks a year, very, very ill. And the rest of the time functioning at a very low level still. So I felt I had something very profound to offer, but I had no stamina to deliver it.
Yes. Yes. So talk to us about, I absolutely loved your combination of degree, master's, doctorate. Talk to us about that. I thought it was amazing.
Well, I had loved academia and I had been treated very kindly and very well. And the 1/6 time led to 1/3, then 2/3. And then by the end, in all humility, I was so efficient and so effective in my work with the energy that I had. I actually came top of my year and won a prize. That was a good day. I got a little envelope saying you've won the prize for overall academic achievement. And I thought, no. And I thought it was a hoax. And I went in and I remember my dad was in the front room. And I said, Daddy, I've had a letter. Do you think it's real? And he, for a moment, he's a mathematician. And he just sat back and he said, Becca, it's all that talking and all those books and all that chatter. So that was lovely. And so the degree was in political science and history. And the reason it was in that subject was because I literally couldn't go to lectures of any other timetable. And I was probably, a humanities kind of girl. I wanted to be a geographer. I couldn't go on any of the trips. So every avenue I wanted to go down just kept getting blocked. And finally, my politics lectures were split through the week. So you could have, a Monday lecture and a Thursday. So I had enough time to recover. So who chooses a degree about where the timetable is and where you can park? Because I didn't have anybody to take me in a wheelchair or an electric wheelchair. So it had to be park the car, 4 steps in, sit in the first seat. And my dad used to take me at nighttime lectures, and people used to say, is dad outside? Because he would wait on the door for me in the car if I couldn't last the hour. And these things, I try and make them quite entertaining and endearing now, but it's quite hard when you're 19 and you can't walk, and are you going to keel over? And if you get this wrong, because the whole of your neurological systems are kaput, are you going to be in bed for 6 months or ruined? So I had great kindness. I had lovely friends who would carry my backpack for me and, mollycoddle me, and don't sit next to me if you've got a cold, whatever you do. Don't give me a bug.
Yeah.
Entire lecture halls were arranged around don't give Becca flu because it'll kill her. So that it was wonderful. It was difficult. It was exhilarating. And it was a true education, really. So that first degree it was joyous. And then at the end of it, they very kindly said, would you like to do a master's? And I thought, me?
We like you. Do what you're told.
So I did, and that was tremendous. So I did a taught master's degree, and I then was in a group where everybody had already done degrees in history, and this was a master's in historical studies. So I was very much the bottom of the class and asked lots of very ignorant questions. But again, ignorant questions take you a long way. And finally, by the end of that, I was beginning to get really good at dissertations and long pieces of work, which took a lot of research, planning, writing, which is really all that we do now, isn't it? And by then, I was beginning to be quite clear that this was my path in some way. And graciously, I managed to come top in that. Didn't get a prize, but it was still nice.
It's like, where's my prize?
Well, the first prize, this was really funny. The first prize was £30. In a check.
You could buy a nice book.
So because I was so rarely able to go out with my pals, I said, we shall go to the pub and I will buy you all drink. So I bought them all drink, and I couldn't drink, but they were happy. And they were very sweet, because my energy was so limited that I could manage an hour on a Wednesday afternoon to see them. So they went to the student union bar in the afternoon, had an hour with me, but then they'd just stay till midnight.
Is this Manakee?
Oh, yes. It was just before Manakee. Yes.
Same place, though.
It was yes. It was. We weren't quite in the poshness of Manakee. We were in Wearmouth Bar.
Oh, okay. So across the river.
Yes, and very smoky, and with Oasis playing all the time.
Oh, and dripping ceilings.
Yeah. Oh, good.
And sticky carpets.
But there was nobody else in there who was happier to be there than me, with my water.
Yay! Did it have ice cubes and lemon in it?
No, because I was so allergic to so many things. It had to come from the tap. I couldn't even have it from the plastic bottle. It was that difficult.
Okay, so masters.
Yes, and then doctorate, and they very kindly offered me a doctorate. And by this time, I was a bit daunted, because PhDs in the art subjects are big things, and I was still very unwell, and having lots of different treatment, and trying desperately to get, from 16 weeks a year flat out to less. But my doctorate was a great education, not in just resilience, but in fortitude. And something that enormous is like trying to push treacle upstairs, I always think. And but I loved it so much, and I loved the people I met. I loved my subject, and I loved ultimately about finding the goodness in brave people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was seeking that all the time. So when my supervisor would mark my chapters back, he'd say, Rebecca, this isn't philosophy. It's not theology. It's not self-help. And I was thinking, but it needs to be. It's so good. It's so interesting. And so I kept finding myself meandering away from academia and really looking for supercharged self-help. How do you keep going? How do you be courageous? How do you overcome? How do you deal with entrenched challenge that is unfair and unrelenting? But how do you become the most of who you are, not embittered, and still able to offer something? So that meander was through all that academic work. And you would go to academic conferences with all these big shots who'd written the books you had read. And they were just so immersed in learning more, thinking, offering, contributing, questioning, listening. And with that much humble intellect around you, it was utterly addictive. And, university libraries are very precious places. And I think one of the biggest shocks was by the time I finished that I wasn't back in a university library anymore.
Taking my library away.
Yeah,
I think we can still go in now.
You can, yes.
Yeah.
But, the business of you can have 40 books out and be friends with the cleaner, it was just such a privilege. So I try and look at it like that now. And I remember by the end of it, I was doing so many talks for university. And I was doing services at church. I was doing lectures to doctors about trying to teach them about ME and what perhaps patients needed, because they were a very, very badly treated group of patients and often made much worse. And people are not just tired who have ME. They have an immune system that's going crackers. They have multiple problems physically and often result in tremendous losses in their lives. Not able to work, they're financially hard up, and just being unwell all the time. So all of that put together did, I hope, offer something in my working life now. That was the background really about seeing ongoing struggle. And by this point, my parents were also very unwell. So I actually had a ton of illness. And we had to do something with it. It wasn't just the academic stuff. It was what the illness had given the academic things.
That's the weird metaphor that's kind of popped into my head. And forgive me if this is like totally inappropriate. On Grand Designs, when they've got a really difficult bit of land or building that they need to convert, and there's some serious kind of boundaries that you have to create something beautiful in. It's almost like what you've done, if that makes sense, because you have to be really, really, really clear and focused on what you want to do. You just make it more beautiful than somebody who's got like a perfectly sort of flat piece of land and you can go and create a house. Does that make sense?
Where you going?
I love Grand Designs.
The resources are very precious.
Yeah.
Time, energy. So you've got to be very focused. Yeah, no, I see where you're going with that.
I think that's a beautiful analogy because, yes, definitely, because the work that I do now, the books, the coaching, the talks, are about counting your blessing and being the blessing. And my sole purpose in this is to offer a loving purpose from it and not be embittered. And I've seen very brave people, and I think, can we be firmer, wiser, stronger, deeper from what happens to us? And it's interesting about resources being very precious. The things I value most now in life are health and unity. And
absolutely,
that's the reason I love what you do so much. I love your unity and just the energy between you and what, this work, and even the title, Inspiration Not, it's just fabulous. And to still be enthusiastic about life and hope. So the business of having very little, and I would put the analogy, people are always interested in the illness bit more than anything. And I want to say, no, it's the books that matter. It's the books. The books are joyous, please. But the interesting thing is that I went on at the end of that doctorate to learn even further lessons in what's precious and the treasure of life, because it's really interesting when you have difficulty about how you manage it and what you do, because it's really easy for motivational speakers to say, push harder, you can do anything you want, life's what you make it. And I think I sometimes want to say, but darling, you have no clue. You've been well, you've been clever, you've been strong, you've been fit, you've had advantages. And one of the first things I used to say to my students at Newcastle University, I would say, you're young, you're fit, you're clever, you've got everything. And they'd look at me like I was crackers. Like, how can we have everything? You crazy lady. And then I'd have to go to bed all afternoon to recover from an hour's lecture. But the advantages you have if you're just well, and if you think wisely and use your resources, you can stretch an awful lot. So I'm quite a good stretcher. But I also have improved. I'm very, very fortunate. I'm not having 40 weeks a year flat out. My bravest friend was dead at 32 from the severest form of ME. I've got 5 or 6 other friends who are still bedridden. So I would fly that flag as often as I could. And you said so beautifully to me, we'll do this today when your energy is best. And that was so thoughtful and so perceptive. And the whole point of it was that by the end of all of this, your grand design is that you're managing your life and your mind as much as you can. And the great irony is that I ended up being patron of mental health charity in Sunderland, Headlight, because they needed somebody to come and speak about resilience a lot. And I do that, and I love them. But they had a public lecture, and their speaker didn't turn up. And my dad said to the organizer, as a joke, Becca will do it for you. Like that off the cuff.
Yeah. Thanks, Dad.
Straight in there. So it's about trying to do what you can with what you have, but being realistic that that's often very, very difficult.
Absolutely. So I'm keen to find out, I took you on a bit of a sort of through, of course, you were talking about the chap that called you darling in the audience that was a business startup dude. Did you ever go back to him?
Well, I did. And this was the amazing point. There have been certain great blessings and miracles of moments through all of this. Is that he turned out to be one of my neighbours.
Sunderland's a village, isn't it?
It was phenomenal. And he was a wonderful man called Willie Herdman, and he worked for the BIC in Sunderland. And he said, come and see me. And I did. And he said, I think you need to be a speaker, Becca. So I said, thank you. But of course, I was so frail, I couldn't travel and go and do normal things. So the lockdowns and the COVID that everybody suddenly had some restriction, I was perfectly at ease because I'd actually never been in the house and well. So suddenly I was talking to people and clients and doing things, helping them. What do you do at the start of lockdown? Because to be honest, I was a bit of an expert in it compared to healthy people. And as soon as I was well, I was out in the past. So I'd never had days and days in the house where I could do anything other than being ill. So I went to see Mr. Herdman, who was just a delight and a joy. And then I went to see a wonderful man called Ron, who then went to work at the BIC to help me take tiny steps towards self-employment. And he said something that was really remarkable. He said, my job is not to motivate you, Rebecca, it's to rein you in and keep you well.
I love that.
I love that. He was so perceptive. And so I started off, I was doing lectures and talks very slowly, very surely. And I was doing all these church services. And suddenly I got asked to take a funeral. Here's another gear change. And I did that funeral and I felt I was home again. I was back to being that 7-year-old. And I was helping people at the worst time of their lives because they talked about illness often of their loved one, and I'd had so much of it. So suddenly I thought, well, I need a little change of direction here because it just wasn't tenable for me to do, lectures and talks all the time. And universities generally wanted more and more of you. So you'd go for an hour in the morning, but could you stay the morning? Could you stay the afternoon? So I had to adapt again, like everybody has with COVID. But at this point, and this is the really poignant bit, my lovely mum got early onset dementia in her 50s, which was beyond horrific. So she needed a lot of care and extra hours and love. So the way of me trying to keep working and look after her was to be a celebrant. So that was writing, researching, speaking, but just looking after people about the things that mattered most. So really, over the last decade, I've done lots of lectures and talks, but the thing I've done most of was I've done almost 1,000 funerals. And that teaches you about life in a way that is so profound, about how to live well, love well, keep going well, and be well. And by the end of that, of course, pandemic hits and I have to shield. And it took me a decade to build. It took me till I was 36 to go to work. It was that long a journey. Start again from scratch. So write another book, write another 2 books, have coaching clients, do online training, back to where I started. But the poignancy of all of that, and it's difficult to reflect on too much, but I ended up looking after my mother for a long time, who was beyond radiant, but I actually took her funeral. I'd taken services for babies and for teenagers and for people who were 102. And all of that had prepared me. And I hope I had loved those families as well as possible to do. All of that had prepared me for when I walked down that church aisle on my own to look after her.
It's a very big event to have to take. I don't think I could have done that.
I wouldn't wish it on anybody. It was terrible, but I also couldn't leave her to anybody else. And it was a profound day, and she had the worst end of the worst end as well. She wasn't just a bit forgetful. She was tortured for a long time, and she was young, and it was horrific. And that's when I was most used to the world, because I thought I could go and visit families before I wrote a service for them. And then 99-year-old great-great-grandpa who'd had some kind of Alzheimer's or something, we understood what it meant. We didn't need to explain anything. It was just that suddenly they thought, my gosh, we'd had him for another 40 years. So suddenly everything, I think, is about perspective and proportion. And I had wonderful parents. I'm very fortunate with my husband, but there have been very, very unusual and enduring challenges. And I don't want to be embittered from them.
No,
I want something from it. And having had so much illness and seen so much of the extremes of life, that makes you value the small things now so magnificently. So just coming to talk to you today, just going to the shower, just having a nice breakfast, being able to work, being able to, put your own socks and shoes on. I have a good capacity of joy because of all of the trouble.
So from all these experiences and making the best of everything, how has that helped you in writing a book?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. Well, I wanted to use it to loving purpose, and I wanted to help people navigate their lives so that they could look at whatever happened to them and think, what do I do to make it better? How do I make it a bit less bad? How do I cope? And also to see their own goodness and capability. And I think I had everybody, in my 30s, everybody around me was having their babies, which was totally joyous and wonderful. And the thing I wanted to be most was a godmother. And I was far too ill to be a mummy, which was so sad. But I thought, well, I'll be some use somewhere. And I hope I've been a good auntie. But I wrote everything in that first book, Lifejoy, Your Manual for Resilient Living, for those godchildren, because I wanted to say, this is what I know. This will help you. Don't be drowning in life. So there's a piece for every big stage in life. So it's meant to be there as a resource. And it's short as well. I don't like long chapters, because when I was unwell and I couldn't read for long, if you gave me a page or 2 pages and I could digest that, it was such a blessing and a gift. And it's probably a bit of laziness on my part too. If you can get something across in 2 pages, you've done well. So that was the first book. And I had that book launch in Shiny Row Library of all places. Because when I was 7, my teacher took us there.
Oh.
And she asked me to give the vote of thanks. So I was always doing these crackers things in junior school. And I remember I stood up and I said, thank you. And my mum said, what did you call the librarian? And I said, Chris. And my mum said, you can't call an adult by their first name. It's so, it's so precocious. So I called her Mrs. Chris. I remember that. Didn't know her surname. So that was just, my mother was just so polite and so lovely. And then, so that was the first book. And I loved writing that, and it's had lovely feedback. And people have said it's helped them cope, but they've also helped them see the joy in their life. Mm-hmm. So whenever they thought they were in trouble, they thought, oh no, I've got an awful lot that's good. And this isn't just positive thinking, it's realistic hope. Mm. And the second book, which was written through the first lockdown, is Your Lifejoy Year, an enriching thought for every day. So the first book is a journey through your life, the big stages. The second book is a reading for every day. And it was only meant to be 100 readings, but it grew.
Like we do.
It did. And that was released at Christmas time. And the loveliest thing in the world has happened with that book is that people have bought it for themselves, but they've bought it for their mothers and their best friends and for people who are having a difficult time. Mm. So when somebody says that has helped, it counters the sadness of all that illness. And the next book is about my grandmother, which is called Inspiring Ivy. And she was a medical missionary to China and ran a Mission China hospital in the 1930s. So she deserved a book. So the next book is Inspiring Ivy.
Wow, sounds like quite a woman.
I know. It's exciting.
She was remarkable.
I think she was a bit of a minx as well, wasn't she?
Oh, she was a joy.
She wouldn't be told no.
Oh, no. When the Japanese invaded Manchuria, she would come and they would get matron to go and plead for the prisoners who were taken. So she was a big Amnesty International advocate all her life. And she'd go and speak to the Japanese authorities and get poor people, political prisoners, out of the prison. And she's 5 foot of fire and brimstone, but she got them out. So she needed a book.
Yes, she did. I can't wait to read that one. It sounds amazing. And it's interesting as well. It's kind of your own lived experience, but then you're able to bring in your history and your storytelling, and it's super exciting. So when's that due to come out? Have you got a deadline?
Soon. That's coming in November, and we're going to have an Ivy Festival of Lifejoy because my books are called Lifejoy. And interestingly, her birthday was on the 11th of November. So it's coming then.
What a date. Yeah.
That's so good. And it's going to be in the week because I became unwell on the 15th of November. So November is I thought we'd interject some sunshine into November. Mm-hmm. No, and then there'll be a Lifejoy journal, which is an interactive book to follow on that series. And then there's Your Lifejoy Year 2 coming the next year.
Oh, you'll be very busy.
She does what she does what she can with what she's got. It's brilliant. It's like that focus and determination, tenacity. It's absolutely inspirational.
And what's I think a very important point is that for those who've not had any form of struggle, poor health, anything particularly bad go wrong or happen in their lives, it's quite easy to coast or waste time almost in life till you get to a point where you do become ill, or some event is a massive derailer in life, a redundancy, and we've seen lots of that through COVID. And it's, I think, such an important message that you said earlier about do what you can with what you have, and it's very easy to not do as much as you can with what you do actually have, or to embrace that and find that joy in life. So I think that's a very powerful lesson.
Thank you. I think, and the other thing is not to underestimate the enormous blessing in being able to coast, because in all those funeral families that I would go and see, many of which are my closest friends now, they would talk to me about their loved one's life, who had lived a good, healthy, long life. They'd had a job, they'd had more than a job, they'd had a career, a vocation, they'd had friends, they'd had holidays, they'd had hobbies. And the wealth of that normality, and we underestimate normality. A lot of people have understood it with COVID in a much more way. And however restricted we are, if we're still here, we're reasonably well, and the people we love are well, there'll be 1,000 people who would swap with us. I always think that. And I think my Emily at 32, Emily Collingridge, she would do anything to be as well as I am. And I'm still not as well as I'd like to be. So I try always to think, what can you do with what you've got? How can you make it better? And if it's unendurable, because there are times that really are, is can we just get to lunchtime?
And I know even from some books I've read of former Navy SEALs going through their Hell Week training, they would call it. The way of actually surviving the day was literally, you'd look to the next post on the pier, or this next stretch of beach, or to the next lamppost, and it was never about how on earth are we going to get to dinner time. It was
just too far off, isn't it?
Yes.
How do you eat an elephant?
In a chicken time, yes. And again, to remember that people in such situations, they have chosen in some respects to be there. I would go and see families who had lost a child through horrific circumstances, and nothing was going to put that right ever. Or somebody who had lost their only person in their world and done their all to look after them through utterly heroic circumstances that were beyond difficult, and made no fuss. And then were still sweet-tempered. And I remember there were very poignant moments in those funerals, because I remember being outside to greet people beforehand, take them in, look after them. And I was freezing by this point. And a woman took off her gloves and gave me her gloves because I was cold. And it was the hardest day of her life, and she was bothered that I was cold. And that was just everything about what's good in us.
I was like those messages of, I forget where it comes from, but it's whenever there's a bad situation, always look for the good, whether it's a terrorist attack, war zones. When you look for the good, there are always people helping, trying to do some form of good, caring for others. And that's, again, it's another very important lesson.
Awesome. So we've talked about books, we've talked about speaking, we've talked about funerals. We haven't talked about coaching, Rebecca. Who do you coach on what?
Oh, thank you for asking. Well, there's a moment when I see my clients sit back in the seat and their eyes open up and they think, oh, I can, maybe I can. And there's something really, you will understand this more than anybody and the people you look after, but there's a moment of electricity up their feet. And I'm hoping that all my trouble and education and experience, I try and think of it as education, empathy, and experience, is then being helpful. So I really do three things. Is I help people with their coping strategies when big trouble hits, or just ongoing chronic conditions are an absolute nightmare and a restriction of life. So I help people with their coping strategies. I help people to see their own valor and fortitude and options. I help people with their communication. So I help them speak in public. And if you're good, I can get you outstanding. I can get you so that you can hold a room and nobody looks anywhere else but you, and that they go away better from having you. And also, if you're just in meetings and you're not being heard, how we process, how we present, how we communicate. So my third is with essentially managing your life and your confidence and the resources within you. So there's a moment when the Zoom works, just like when we came into the room, that makes me utterly joyous. Still.
Technology works, yes.
Yes. And then I think, let's go to work. Come on, let's start running together intellectually. And there's something very, very precious about somebody trusting you and you sharing your wisest questions and your wisest empathy and trying to make their situation and just them that bit stronger. And there's sometimes wonderful things that happen, you know, all that wonderful life coaching things that they teach you about how to help people navigate goals and plans and structures. But there's something wonderful when somebody says, I've been wondering, what if? And I hear my voice inside say, of course, my treasure, you should do this. Yes, yes, yes. And there's another part of me that thinks, go carefully, darling, go carefully. Let's just do this safely and wisely. So there's a constant tension of recklessness and caution. So I think together we navigate wisdom.
Yeah, I talk about James has got that. He's got a very strong sort of accelerator, but he's got a strong brakes. Don't you? Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm all accelerator, but yeah.
Yes.
Mainly ADHD on that one. I'm either go or completely stopped. There's no in the middle. Yeah.
Well, it's very good to know your own self, isn't it? Know our own follies.
It is. Yeah. And for working together, it makes it much more productive.
Yes. Your lovely, lovely energy. That's so precious to each other.
Yeah, he's canny. Have we missed talking about anything, Rebecca? Do you need anything else that you'd like to share?
I think you've just been lovely and I've loved being with you. Thank you.
Oh, cool. So we're going to lower the tone now.
That'll do.
We're moving on to the
Don't ask me about booze because I don't know anything about it.
It's not about booze. No. So quick fire round. James, take it away.
Question number 1. Which fictional villain is your favourite?
Oh my goodness. Somebody once said I looked like the Doctor in Inspector Morse, and I was thrilled. And then I saw the Doctor, and it was Max.
I need to go and look at that.
Yes, go and look at the early ones of Morse. And there's a woman pathologist, and it's quite funny. So I watched a lot of Morse. So I should think probably, who did I like? There was a character called Hugo de Vries in one of those episodes. And he was a monkey, so I'd probably be Hugo de Vries. Very naughty boy.
Naughty monkey, I love that. So I had to ask this question. So what brings you the most joy in life?
Health and unity.
Awesome.
And my precious people, and also kiddies, I have to say. The biggest delight is their glee in life.
Absolutely.
Totally agree.
And also seeing people rise and just navigate through. Sometimes I want to put my hand on somebody's shoulders and say, you'll cope. This is horrible and it'll be horrible for a long time, but we'll get you through. And it may not be better afterwards and it may be different and you may have a limp and a big scar and life will always be that little bit less colourful. And yet. And I think when people can use their and yet, that gives me joy.
Absolutely.
And third question, which food couldn't you live without?
Oh, well, that's so entertaining because I couldn't eat hardly anything for about 15 years. I had such severe food allergies and intolerances. So any food was a great blessing in my life. I ate buckwheat with gratitude and chickpeas. There's always like an extreme answer. I'm sorry, it's not like really a quick answer.
It's like, well, you can make hummus with chickpeas, go mental.
Yes. So I would say I couldn't eat fruit for a long time. And when I managed to get some fruit back, oh my goodness, the joy of a strawberry.
Joy of a strawberry. Oh, cool. So are you able to eat much more now?
Thankfully, I can eat. I have to be very cautious. So I eat a very simple, but I hope very healthy and, to have energy and not have big allergic reactions and have to go to hospital and all that carry on. Takes a lot of discipline, but I'm very grateful because my dad is so very poorly because his food problems are enormous. They haven't got better despite a ton of treatment. So he's very thin, very ill, and it makes you realize how precious 300 calories is. Everything comes back down to that, what illness teaches you all the time. So the question we ask everybody, if we could get in the time machine and take you back to 18-year-old you, what advice would you give you? Oh, that's just the best question ever. In the first book, I suggest that people write a letter to their younger self, but write a letter to their older self or their own service about what you would want people to say and know about you. And at 18, without being dramatic, I was ruined completely. And it had all gone downhill so desperately. But if you'd said that, what would you say at 16? Because at 16, I could run, climb mountains, swim, dance till 2 a.m. I was a lively child. Is I would say to that 16-year-old what I say to all my clients and in everything I do is I would just say, slow down a bit, treasure. Swap the pop for the water. Get to bed, get to bed, get to bed. And if you get glandular fever or any kind of, nasty virus, do not push. Because I just pushed, and that's what really entrenched me into such a madness. So I would say that. And I would say it will be much more difficult than you could have imagined. But you will be sent help and you'll cope at a certain level. And it won't be perfect and it won't be normal. But there will be absolute joy in parts of it.
Amazing advice.
It is lovely. So for our listeners, if you'd like to follow what Rebecca's up to, best place to start, go to the website, drrebecca.org.uk. We've really enjoyed chatting. I feel really energized now and should go and paint the attic or something.
Yes, I could talk to you all day, but we realised this when we had a pre-chat, didn't we?
We had, my husband calls it quack, and when he's around, I just follow him and I don't stop talking because it's so interesting to talk to him. So we have had beautiful quack, haven't we? It's been a blessing.
It has. So thank you ever so much for coming on, and can't wait to release this into the world because you've got such an important message to share with so many people.
Thank you so much for having me and for all your work and efforts. It's been a lovely start to the week.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway and tell everybody.